Greetings everyone and welcome back to 365 Days of Prog. Today we're going to be reviewing the album Hubardo by the band Kayo.
Hi, my name's Naomi. I'm an avid progressive rock fan, but I'm a long ways from knowing all the prog albums out there. But this year, I'm gonna give it a try. This is 365 Days of Prog.
I am really in a good mood. Okay, I was not able to record a video yesterday, sorry about that. But yes, today we're getting 2 videos, so nothing bad about that, I guess. And yeah, I'm in a really good mood. I just started realizing the fact that we're really close to the end of this one, and don't make it seem like I'm really longing to just finish this series, but the fact of accomplishment of doing this for 365 days is, well, it's something pretty big, and I'm gonna talk about it more when I do the final video of the year. So yeah, thank you for that, but for now, let's move on to some of my favorite bits from this album. Today we'll be looking at Kayo, a band which I wanted to call Kayo, but then I saw the review by the Needle drop and now I know that I am basically incorrect. And yeah, this is a band which we've never really delved into, but we've technically also visited in the past. Well, back in episode 196, we listened to Part the Second by Maudlin of the Well, and if you know anything, you know that these two bands are basically intertwined with one another and closely related as well. So in the year of 2002, the band Maudlin of the Well, which is a post-metal, extreme black metal band, basically decided to disband despite their career actually starting to get pretty good at that point. And well, their frontman Toby Driver and the multi-instrumentalist that was basically leading the band at the time decided that he really didn't want his musical career to stop there. So he decided to regroup some of the past members of Maudlin of the Well and form yet a new group in 2003 called Kayo. Now the band itself actually quickly signed a recording contract with the Tzadik record label. Now if you know anything about Tzadik, is that they basically sign a lot of avant-garde bands in various musical genres, and well, if you know Maudlin of the Well, it doesn't really seem too far-fetched for them to be a pretty avant-garde band. And well, Kayo were basically just that. Despite embracing a lot of their post-metal influences, they were also heading in a direction that would be incorporating a lot of progressive rock, as well as jazz fusion and of course the familiar metal. Now later in 2003, Kayo would actually come out with their debut album, and that one would be called Choirs of the Eye, which would be this big extravaganza of post-metal, which sounded quite a lot like Maudlin of the Well, which acted in their benefit because a lot of the past fans of Maudlin of the Well quickly shifted to go ahead and listen to Kayo, thus substantiating their fanbase quite quickly. Now to be perfectly honest with you, while I would like to talk more about the history and what happened afterwards in Kayo.'s history, I would really say that there's really not a lot going on. Basically what happened in the following years is that the fan base of Kayo grew and grew well beyond what Maudlin of the Well had, and the band itself just got more and more popular as they kept on releasing more and more albums. Now at this point of the video, for someone who doesn't really know these two bands that well, you might be asking yourself, well, how is Kayo different from Maudlin of the Well? And the answer to that would be, well, they are different because of circumstances, I guess. You see, the band was formed by Toby Driver, and Toby Driver from the beginning said that he wanted this to be something different, something more experimental, something that would stretch the boundaries of the music that they created so far, and that would definitely show with a lot of their albums going in various different directions, never really sticking to one thing, but always remaining somewhat avant-garde in a way. And well, pair that with the fact that a lot of members in this band kept coming and going, the band style always kept on changing, thus rendering them as something new on almost each of their new albums. Now, of course, when I say that the band's lineup continued on to change through its incarnations, the only one to always stay with the band was of course no other than its original founder, that being Toby Driver. Now, in the course of the years between 2003 and 2012, the band themselves released 5 studio albums, and a lot of them started off the tradition of the band basically going ahead and kickstarting or crowdfunding the creation of their albums. It's not like they had sufficient funds from their labels, as I get it, but they just wanted to create something more, so they crowdfunded their albums using their own fan base, and in return they got back really well produced albums. And well, when it came down to it, in 2014, Toby Driver would announce on the Kayo website that they were working on a new concept album, which would actually be a double album. And despite what everyone thought that they were gonna be kickstarting this one, they instead did something a bit different, which was to pre-order the album, which meant that fans of the band would pre-order the album, they would fund the creation of it, and when the time came, they would receive a copy of the album for themselves. And the album itself would actually be released in September of that year to some great critical acclaim, mostly deriving from the fact that both the fan base and the critics of this album would note that this one came quite a bit back to Choirs of the Eye in terms of its sound. Now, I'm kind of going off script here. From what I've known, Toby Driver basically said that the reason that Kayo kind of diverted from the metal scene and trying different new things is because he felt like he was just creating this very generic sort of metal music and people just kept loving it no matter what it was, and he really didn't want to do the same thing over and over again, so he kind of just laid that off. But then they came back with this new album that was spearheaded by Driver himself in a way that was never really tried before, and well, people just absolutely dug that. Now, the name of the album would actually be Hubardo, which means lamp or lantern in the ancient language of Enochian, I think that's what it's called. It's basically a 16th century English language that was associated with angels and the mystics and magic. I don't know where they came up with this idea, but I guess it's pretty cool. Now, as I mentioned, this double album is also a concept album, and the concept for it actually derives mostly from its lyrics, which were written before the music itself. And the lyrics themselves were written mostly by Jason Byron, which was actually the original vocalist for Maudlin of the Well, which he hasn't worked with Kayo up until this point. And well, he actually created a lot of the lyrics for this album, but he also created a 40-page book that was inserted into the entire package of this one when it was released, titled The Sword of Satan, which detailed the entire story of the album. Now, personally, I'm not really sure what this album is about, but if I got it correct, it has to do something with a stone that fell out of the sky and into like this village, and everyone was afraid of it, and then this poet found the stone and they took it home, and then there was a lightning strike and the stone cracked open. There was a seed inside. They went ahead and planted the seed in the forest, and then it came back and there was a river there, so he built a boat and went down the river. And yeah, you get what I'm saying. It's a really odd story, and honestly it was really hard for me to follow it, and mainly because of the simple reason that when you growl the vocals, I don't know how you're gonna expect me to understand what they're about. I really don't know what the story was telling, and when it comes down to it, as a concept album, I don't feel like I really understood the concept of it. And well, usually when it comes down to these concept albums, I don't really necessarily think that a concept is quintessential for an album to work. But when it comes down to these long albums, and this one is almost 100 minutes of length, I do believe that a concept does help ease the album, makes it into an experience worth experiencing, and thus not making it feel so overstretched and long. And you know, a great example, at least for that practice to me, is Pink Floyd's The Wall. But when it comes down to this album, not realizing what the concept is really made me feel the longevity of this album, the fact that it was stretching onwards and onwards and onwards to the point where I really couldn't take that much. Yes, I did listen to this one in one sitting, and maybe that was the wrong thing to do, but I just really wanted to get it over with, and I don't think 2 sittings were to be doing this one justice as well. And one of the main reasons for it is the fact that this album is distinctly a double album. You have the first LP and you have the second LP, and to me they feel very different from one another. The first LP is very metal oriented, it is black metal, it is death metal, it is something that I personally really like. I've discovered this year that I love death metal apparently, and well, I really like the first LP. But when it comes down to the second one, it is really avant-garde, it is really long, there's some really long songs on that one which I really didn't want to sit down and listen to, but I just had to because, you know, commitment. And yeah, not my favorite, and if I'm saying that this album is not that good, it's mainly because of that second LP. And while I am saying that the second LP is the one that I feel is the most stretched out and just long and mostly boring part of the album, the track that actually exemplifies this best comes from the first LP, and it's called The First Matter. This one establishes this very slow groove that just moves on for 9.5 minutes, and I really couldn't take it that much, so yeah, it's not really my favorite. But when it comes down to it, I do actually have a favorite track from this album, much like I have from every album that I review on this list, and it happens to be the third track on the album called Thief. This one really exemplifies the great use of avant-garde music on here, especially avant rock. You might also even compare this one a bit to the Canterbury style, but I do believe that it mostly has to do with the brass and the horns and the trumpet solo on here. It is really something out there. It's unlike anything that I expected to find on this album, but it's really fun. But when it comes down to it, I also love the death metal sections on here, and honestly, I would have loved it if this album was just one LP, a single LP album that was filled with death metal, maybe some of those avant inspirations, but honestly, that would have made this one a pretty close to perfect one for me. But all in all, as I said, I do find that this type of post-metal is somewhat of a hit or miss with me, and while the first LP hit, the second one definitely missed, and seeing as the first one is not perfect by any means, the average of the two is pretty low, so while I do have some fond memories of this album, all in all, I will just think of forgetting this one for the time being because it's really just not worth coming back to, at least not with this ridiculous length of it. What do you reckon that this album cover depicts? Because to me at least it feels like I've seen one thing on it and now I can't see anything else. And personally what I see on this one is like this section, you know, just like part of the neck, you know, the shoulder and some of the chest, and it looks to me like that, but you know, it's also superimposed and it's also in black and white, so we really can't tell what it is, and you have the raindrops or the drops in general in the background, and I really don't know what this one is supposed to be, and when paired with the album itself, the concept and the music, it is really baffling to me. It is one that I'm quite neutral to as well. This album cover just doesn't really feel like it has any connection to anything, but I do like the band logo, so I guess that's something. So before I give you the rating for this album, I just want to say that I'm pretty proud of myself. I've had some really long takes with this one without any cuts, without anything, and I don't know, I just feel like I'm really flowing when talking about this album as a whole, and I do feel like my sense of loquaciousness has really developed in the making of the past few videos, and I'm really happy for it. But when it comes down to this album's rating, I do feel like it's not really that good. All in all, it has some really shining moments on it that I featured mainly in my favorite bits, but all in all, I'd have to give this one an underwhelmed rating of 6 out of 10. But that's about it, guys. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for tomorrow because we're going to be listening to Z-Mice by the band Mother Turtle. I of course want to thank my lovely supporters over on Patreon, so thank you so much to Claymon and Rest of Kings and Lindsay. Hey Cox, you guys are just the best. And if any of you want to support me over on Patreon, you can find the link down in the description or in my About page. But that's about it, guys. Have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Bye, guys.